Welcome to Convos, unheard and disregarded on iHeart's IntellectualRadio.com. I am your co-host, Kanuya Yakumura, and I'm joined by my esteemed and somewhat hoarse colleague today, Frank Bass.
Hey everybody, how you doing?
Goodness. This is a weekly conversational intersection of politics and policy where we use current news as a backdrop. Unfortunately, the opinions and perspectives from black folk go unheard or are in many cases disregarded. This show allows our listeners to be better informed about the world around us from a black perspective by simply going to intellectualradio.com. We invite those near and far to not only listen, but be an active participant. Before we get into it, I want to extend condolences to and well wishes to Reverend Jeremiah Wright as the pastor emeritus at Trinity United Church of Christ as he goes about his rehabilitation. We wish him blessings and farewell. And also Commissioner, I believe, Joan Murphy from the sixth district, county commissioner district, passed away of cancer recently. So our heart and prayers go out to her and her family. So let's get into it. Frank, did you happen to hear about Colin Powell last week?
Yeah.
He pretty much gave the finger. To
everybody.
Yeah, the finger he gave to to the establishment on both sides of the aisle. For those that don't know, there was an email hacking scandal that resulted in some interesting tidbits about Colin Powell and what he really thinks. For those that don't know, Colin Powell is a leading Republican establishment figure, a well-respected and smart patriot on both sides of the aisle, former Army general of 35 years, former White House security advisor, former chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. That is the highest-ranking military officer in the country, who is serves as a principal advisor to the president, national security advisor, and secretary of defense. In addition to that, he was the first African-American secretary of state and a former commander of the U.S. Army forces. This is a big deal. It was not supposed to be public, but in this age of the hacking age that we are experiencing in this country, he actually ended up being a victim of that. Were you wearing some of the stuff you said?
Yeah, but this goes back to why I don't put anything that I really don't want nobody to know in an email, Facebook, or none of that. It's gonna be person to person.
No doubt about it.
But it's funny how he said the whole birther movement was racist. He also indicated that when Donald Trump couldn't keep that part going, he wanted to see Donald wanted to make sure that the word Muslim was put on the president's birth certificate. And Powell's quote was, as he said before, what if he was? Muslims are born in America, was born as Americans every day. So, it's funny because he dogged out both of them. He talked about Hillary too.
Oh no, he was an equal opportunity basher. He indicated that Bill Clinton was still seeing other women. That wasn't how he said it, but that's what he indicated. He indicated that everything Hillary touches, she screws up. He referred to the Cheneys as idiot. For those that don't know, Dick Cheney and his daughter wrote a book. He called them both idiots. He called Benghazi a stupid witch hunt. He said Trump appeals to the worst angels of the GOP nature and poor white folks. And he referred to Trump's military advisor, Michael Flynn, as a right-wing nutty and questioned how he got that far in the military in the first place. He referred to Hillary Rodham Clinton as sleazy and indicated that he would rather not vote for Hillary, even though he called her a friend that he respects. And last but not least, he called all the GOP campaigns over the last year reality shows with Donald Trump playing Jerry Springer. Now, you can't help but wonder Had Hillary not dragged him into this election season, would this have made news? If you recall, Hillary Clinton tried to use him as cover in the wake of her email scandal, saying that Powell used his own private email.
Right.
So why shouldn't I be able to? Well, the hackers went to work and they said, well, let's just see what Colin Powell's email has to say. And it's revealed quite a bit. And this is not just any person here. Again, well respected, and he was the personification of diplomatic acumen up until now. So he has admitted that, or through his spokesman, he admitted that the emails were his. And what are some of your thoughts, Frank?
I guess this is as truthful as you can get from a person. You know, I'm looking at it now, and he says for good reason. She, meaning Hillary Clinton, comes across as sleazy, and that's why a lot of people don't trust her. Is it sleazy?
No, that was the word sleazy.
Yeah.
She was referred to as sleazy.
And
and
talked about Trump.
Mm-hmm.
You know, basically saying that those who are following him are kind of like idiots,
right?
And you know, aren't really, you know, the races of the races, and anybody with any sense wouldn't go with him. So yeah, he was an equal opportunist. But the one thing that didn't get a lot of media coverage is the one in the email where he says that Israel has 200 nuclear missiles aimed at Tehran. You know, that's big news.
Yeah, and it got a little publicity. Of course, it's not as salacious and sexy as some of the other comments, so maybe that's why the mainstream media outlets did not run it. But what he has said is a reflection. What he said about both candidates is a reflection of what many of the voters out here believe. They see Trump as a racist and incompetent, and Hillary Clinton is seen as dishonest and sleazy. If you recall, there was another email hack situation during the Democratic National Convention last month where it was revealed that the Democratic National Committee was not as impartial as they had led one to believe, as related to who should be the candidate. At that time, it was Senator Bernie Sanders and Secretary Clinton. It was revealed that there were key people at the higher echelon of the Democratic National Committee that actually were leaning and doing everything in their favor, in Hillary Clinton's favor. And because of those emails, that just added more to the idea that Debbie Wasserman, former head of the DNC, was in cahoots with Hillary Clinton to ensure that she would be the Democratic candidate for the United States presidency. So while many say, well, this shouldn't really matter, it does matter because at the end of the day, elections are all about image and marketing. Right. And unfortunately, these email hackers have revealed, not unfortunately, but fortunately, these email hackers have revealed a little more insight. They've given us a little more insight as it relates to what's going on in the minds and hearts of these two candidates and their and the apparatus that they are using to become president. Shady times, to say the least.
But you know what? I'm glad it came out. I just hope that it doesn't impact how people, not how they vote, but impact the election to the point where people will not even come out to vote. Everyone in the Democratic circles knew that, you know, they was trying to make this the Democratic presidential race for the nominee. They basically tried to clear everybody else out, and they really didn't take Bernie Sanders serious.
Right.
You know, and you could tell by the emails and some of the things they said about him, you know, and I kind of wonder if all bets was off and everybody stepped back and let them two go at it from day one. Would Bernie be the nominee, right, as opposed to Hillary? Right. And that's the only unfortunate thing, is because we were really, you know, not really find out who could have really won that race, because they could have said they tried to do the same thing for her with Barack.
Right.
But they couldn't. The Democratic natural apparatus had no impact on young folks and how they vote.
Right.
And and if you go back and look, the whole tide changed once he got into South Carolina. And they meaning the regular elected Democratic officials was talking to black folks saying don't vote for Barack until black folks from Chicago and the Midwest basically converged on South Carolina. It's like, and going in the salons and say, how you gonna vote for Hillary and you got this black man running for president?
Right. Right.
And that's when the joke started coming out that Bill wasn't the first black president. This dude could be your first real black president.
Right. Right. So you're right. In 2008, at that time, U.S. Senator Barack Obama kind of came out of nowhere. The standard bearer was supposed to be Hillary Clinton. It was hers for the taking. In 2008, Barack pretty much came out of nowhere. In this election, you had Bernie Sanders, who was in some ways on the outs with the Democratic Party,
right.
Being a democratic socialist that he is. They did not think that he was going to be able to inspire young people and garner the votes that he did, and ended up being a hell of a race. And to a point where Bernie indicated, he said, listen, this thing has been rigged from the beginning.
Yeah.
If you recall some of the voting stations across the country, there was some foul play. And then leading up right to the Democratic National Convention, it was revealed that the scales may have been tipped in Hillary's favor once these emails about once these DNC emails from some of their top staff was indicating or determining strategies or planning on strategies to tip the scale in Secretary Clinton's favor. So all that plays a role in why Hillary Clinton is perceived to be sleazy and dishonest, not to mention some of the comments related to her referring to African Americans as super predators and things of that nature. So it's a nasty mudslinging business, politics that is, as you well know, Frank. And so what Colin Powell indicated in his emails, for many, is confirmation, as if we really needed it. But it does not help Hillary Clinton, and it does not help Donald Trump. Although I think the effect, it's going to have a nastier effect on the Clinton campaign than it will the Trump campaign.
Yeah, because you think about it, Hillary should be coasting by now, based on all the stupid stuff and the mean and hatred type of things that Trump has done, and he's with her neck to neck. And all this goofiness that the Clintons have done is now costing the Democrats a chance at winning the Senate. Because just a month ago, I was getting calls about, hey, do you think we can also cut big into the Republicans' lead in the House? Now those calls are died, and now they're concerned about races. They, like for a prime example, in Ohio, the incumbent is a Republican. The Democratic nominee in that race came within 4 points. Now he's back to double points being behind.
Right. Yeah, everyone always said this was Hillary Clinton's race to lose. And at this point, we're around 50 days before Election Day. Hillary's contingent, there's an issue as to whether or not millennials are going to come to the polls. Many of them have said they are not embracing this lesser of two evils argument. They actually may stay home. On the other hand, you recall that Donald Trump got more Republican primary votes than any other Republican candidate for presidency in recent history. Right. So in normal instances, the Democratic Party typically leads the way in terms of turnout. But for the first time in a long time, the Democrats are actually worried about turnout. And it's very possible that Donald Trump may become the 45th president of the United States come November. So we shall see. But Colin Powell warned her. That was another email. I told Hillary and her minions to not bring me into this. Had she not brought Colin Powell and what he did with his emails and having a private email server into this, I don't think this would be an issue. So it kind of goes back to what Colin Powell says in one of his emails, where he said it seems like, Hillary screws up every single time. So we shall see. We shall see. Let's pivot a little bit. Your mayor, Frank Rahm Emanuel, is attributing gun violence to absentee fathers. The mayor says he plans to expand the Becoming a Man program for this reason. For those that don't know, Becoming a Man is a program geared toward African American adolescents and teenage boys. BAM, as it is referred to, served 2,700 students in the last school year, and as a result has seen crimes fall and graduation rates increase in those schools. The mayor wants to boost the funding for BAM and other mentoring programs to include other students. What are your thoughts?
I want to know that. Now, what did you just say? Because in 2014, the city received $10 million from the feds regarding this Becoming a Man program. Mm-hmm. And the first time I heard of it is when you talked to me about it on Sunday. Well, when you texted me this morning about it.
Okay. Well, it's been around a while. It's got a lot of airplay. I believe the President Obama has referenced Becoming a Man as being a model to be replicated across the country. And they have received some money from the federal government.
But I still want to know what for $10 million that has been spent so far by the city on this program. You gave out some data. Say that data again, because what I'm trying to figure out is that we've still had over 500 murders this year.
Right. Well, again, Becoming a Man, or BAM as it is referred to, served 2,700 students in the last school year. It targets African American adolescents and teenage boys. And as a result of this cultural and academic enrichment programming, according to the administration, crime has fallen and graduation rates have increased. And so the mayor wants to boost this funding for BAM and other mentoring programs to include students. And so what he's saying is, to address gun violence, we need to address the issue related to absentee fathers. And BAM is one of the programs that go a long way in addressing the absence of fathers in our communities and raising prospective fathers in the right way.
I don't.
It looks like you have some issues.
I have issues because the real problem is not some funding program to teach some kid on how to become a man. The problem is the fact that, he was the chief of staff, and when he was in the White House, and they put on the mass incarceration of black men for nonviolent offenses. Mm-hmm. If you really want to do something on trying to get black men to become men, how about we fund schools properly? How about we get more black men into the unions through the apprenticeship programs, through community benefits agreements? And how come we're not doing more, Mr. Mayor, to change how we lock people up? Or what about the police who put bogus charges on people just to increase and pad their numbers? Or the state's attorney who wants to, instead of giving black men probation, send them downstate to prison? Or what about the fact that, the mayor is doing all these great things to build housing in affluent neighborhoods, but poor black neighborhoods are just looked at as being poor and black? So hey, it's a great thing that he's getting kids to increase their graduation rates and test scores. But I can tell you, go look at Leif Erikson Grammar School or Penn Grammar School on the west side, and then go over to Suter, which is a CPS school on Washington and Damon, and just look how different those kids are getting services over at Suter than they are at the other two schools. And so I'm saying, if you really want to invest in something, invest in Black kids' education, invest on getting Black men trained or teaching them how to become entrepreneurs and things of that nature. Yeah, it's great. You got $10 million from the federal government. That's a feel good thing. And now you want to bring in more money. But at the end of the day, 9 times out of 10, these kids weren't the ones that's going to come out shooting anyway. What about these other kids out here that really need real help and need some guidance? Why should a public school teacher have to do fundraisers to get pencils and pens in a classroom?
I understand where you're coming from, Frank. I do have some issues with this approach. I'm actually personally sick of blame the victim approaches to improving Black communities. Those blame the victim approaches are insensitive, they're racist, they can be very patronizing, and they often exploit and misappropriate well-intentioned prevention strategies like becoming a man that were created to stop the bleeding, but not necessarily destined to heal the wound. They often have other Black folk, including some pastors and elected officials, that endorse this nonsense or remain silent when they object. When you think of these blame the victim approaches, this is related to the Black on Black crime arguments. The idea that maybe Black folks should be more respectful to police and they probably wouldn't be dead. Maybe they shouldn't wear those hoodies. They look scary. The folk they ought to be listening to, they often ignore, or their gatekeepers ignore. Now I'm referring to the 5th floor, the mayor's office. The folk they ought to be listening to, they typically ignore, or the gatekeepers of City Hall ignore. Certainly addressing issues in poor communities is necessary, whether it's gun violence or absentee fathers, but pointing the finger at absentee fathers is not the solution to surging gun violence. Gun violence and absentee fatherhood are symptoms of the same problem, poverty. And it's a problem that no one is taking head on or getting tough on. We seem to be willing to be tougher on crime, but no one wants to be tougher on poverty. And so you don't say one symptom is the solution to another symptom and expect the problem to go away. You don't take a painkiller and apply a bandage to cure an ACL injury. I think it requires a reconstructive remedy. The mayor's office, and I believe a lot of his advisors, are misinformed. I think they offer stopgap measures that are politically expedient and appetizing to voters, but they rarely solve problems in the long term. Why not? Well, because as long as they keep misdiagnosing the real problem, they'll continue to strike out when claiming that symptom management is a viable solution strategy. As long as we're not honest about the legacy of government's relationship in Chicago's poor and Black communities, government's role in solving this problem will be an exercise in wheel spinning and PR spinning. And we are too well aware of the fact that, using the knife analogy that I've heard many times, government has given, in many cases, poor community has taken a knife and has stabbed poor communities in the back, and then they take the knife out of the community's back, puts it in their hand and says, "Look what you've done to yourselves." And one example of that, to me, is the CHH transformation debacle. The largest public housing land grab in American history that has played a role in the gun violence we see now. I think the city wants to hire between several hundred and up to 1,000 new police officers in the wake of the surging gun violence. Again, this satisfies voters because it makes them feel safer. It satisfies politicians because they get love for being tough on crime. But as history and as the research has shown, it won't work. It will not decrease crime. More and tougher law enforcement does not deter crimes of poverty. And what I'm talking about when I say crimes of poverty, I'm talking about people that commit crimes not because they are mentally inept or they have some pathological disorder or The real reason is crimes of poverty refer to crimes that are committed because people don't have money. And so it just makes matters worse when you try to be tougher on crime, or you try to have more by having more law enforcement, and we've seen what has happened when that we've employed the tougher on crime strategies. We're looking at some of the draconian incarceration policies that you referenced, Frank. You end up having way more funerals than you should. You end up having fatherless households. And I mean, many remember the crack cocaine epidemic. And why did crime go down? Contrary to what Giuliani and some of the other right-wing zealots believe, it had nothing to do with more police or harsher penalties. The reason that crime went down was because the price of cocaine went down. And
Right.
because the price of cocaine goes down and it makes it a lot easier to get, you had more drug dealers on the streets. You had so many drug dealers on the streets, the price of crack went down as a result, which made a lot of the drug dealers say, this is not even worth selling anymore because it's so easily accessible and so cheap to get. We don't make any money. It had nothing to do with increase in or it had nothing to do with harsher penalties. But let me tell you, Frank, as you said earlier, you know what does work and has been proven to work historically, and the research shows that community resource programming works. The very type of programming many of our friends, our GOP friends, are doing away with. And we're talking about recreational programming, cultural programming, academic and employment programming. My point is this: reallocate those dollars away from law enforcement and more towards community programming. To hell with getting tougher on crime. Perhaps we should be tougher on poverty.
I mean, if we put, meaning, you know what, government is run by the people, but since the people, majority of the people sit back and watch TV, don't get engaged, do everything but get engaged in what actually impacts their everyday way of life, you get the ones that are engaged controlling what happens to everyone. And we as Black people know what's going on, and we need to look at each other and say we need to come as close to being together as we can be and start demanding some of the things that we want. And that goes from a community center in our neighborhood to how quick the street lights gets fixed, or what are we doing with our neighborhood schools, and what are we doing with the kids that are hanging out on the corner, and what can we do to prevent them from wanting to sell drugs in the first place? I don't even understand why we're not pushing more kids to go to college or to some vocational school. I mean, we control our destiny if we put our feet forward and push and demand certain things. And the reason why I'm saying this is because on my way here, I had a person from the Painters Union complaining about how Hispanic, and I do not like comparing what Black folks do to Hispanic folks do, because I think it's two different parallels, but Hispanic folks come in demanding that a percentage of Latino workers work on projects. And our Black elected officials are pushing for people to come out of certain zip codes. And so the problem with that, the zip code piece, is that once the union can't find enough from that zip code, then the contractor is allowed to go out and get whoever they want to go get, because now they don't have to be union, because the union has tried to get union workers on these projects. Whereas on the Hispanic side, the Hispanics meet that goal by doing several things. So for, let's say, a project has to be 25% Hispanic or Latino, they will get 25% of Latinos in general working on the project. Well, they know that the union, for example, ain't 25%, or it's not 25% Latino. So what happens is that to meet that 25% goal, they now get Hispanics from that neighborhood into the apprenticeship program, because that help meets the 25% threshold. So that Latino may not be working on that project you see when you're driving down the street, but there's a Latino in school getting ready to work on the next project. And what people don't get is that these jobs are paying $70 an hour, And so when we talk about what we want to do for our community, these are the things we need to get on our elected officials about, and asking them to start doing community community benefit agreements to demand that if the project is in a black neighborhood, make it 50% black. If it's in a white neighborhood, make it 30% black, or whatever the percentage of black people that live in that county. But the reason why I'm saying that is because it opens the door to allow more black people who are not in the union to get into an apprenticeship program and working. That way they can also get a skill set, learn a trade, and if they want to, go out on their own and have their own electrical company once they're finished with the apprenticeship program and they become a journeyman. And that's what we need more of.
Yeah. So the way to address gun violence, Mr. Mayor, is not to attack it from the absentee father perspective. Certainly, absentee fathers are a problem. But again, gun violence is a symptom, and so is absentee fatherhood in our communities. That is a symptom of something bigger. And a proper solution would be in line with what Frank is indicating: employment opportunities, community resource programming, steering resources away from harsher and more law enforcement towards community-based programming that that Frank has highlighted. They keep missing the ball, and as long as they keep missing the ball, violence is going to persist. And unfortunately, again, I do believe that some of the mayor's advisors are misinformed and they have bad information. And that has led to this debacle that we're experiencing right now in a lot of our neighborhoods. And maybe it's time that he reaches out to some non-traditional partners, the people that have been indicating this is what he should do, but the folk that do not have the ear of the mayor, because the violence is just going to persist.
Correct.
So let's shift a little bit, Frank. Now, I know you're a Cook County guy. And recently, the chief judge, I believe Cook County has the largest
Court system
in the country.
One of the largest. I think LA County has caught them.
Yeah, and recently, Chief Judge Tim Evans was facing some political heat to a point where the Democratic establishment ran a couple people against him. Do you know
AKA Tony Preckwinkle.
Okay. Well, what happened? What's the deal with that? I read about it in the newspaper. I know Chief Evans has been in that role for 20-something years. An accomplished, a former alderman. I believe he was an alderman of the Fourth Ward for 20 or more years. He's now been in this chief judge slot for Cook County for a long time.
Right.
All of a sudden, the Democratic wolves were circling his wagon. What happened?
This is a continuation of President Preckwinkle trying to take ultimate control over every angle that the county does business.
So Tony Preckwinkle was the president of Cook County.
Cook County Board.
Yeah.
And
so this is all.
This is part of the old fight because Preckwinkle beat Evans to become the alderman.
Okay, so years ago, before President Preckwinkle became head of Cook County, she was the Fourth Ward alderman.
Correct.
Before she was Fourth Ward alderman, she actually ran for the alderman seat 4 times.
Right.
And at that time, Tim Evans was the incumbent.
Right.
In the wake of Harold Washington's death, Chief Judge Tim Evans, I believe there's some deal making behind closed doors.
Yeah, he got up and said God came to him, Harold came to him. The former mayor, Harold Washington, who passed, came to Evans in his sleep and said, run for mayor. So
Tim Evans thought that he should become Mayor Washington's successor.
Correct.
Okay, and Alderman Evans at that time said Harold spoke to him in prayer in his sleep.
Yeah.
That did not happen.
Yeah, Tim Evans is the reason why Mayor Daley became mayor.
Okay, so that did not happen. Ultimately, what happened, Mayor Eugene Sawyer, alderman of the 6th Ward, became mayor. A deal was cut behind closed doors that ensured that Tim Evans would be taken care of by the Democratic Party. He ends up becoming chief judge.
Wait, no, start over. Sawyer was the mayor.
Eugene Sawyer becomes mayor.
He was mayor. When that election of '89 came out, Evans ran against Sawyer.
Okay.
Because there was a movement saying Sawyer was the white stooge.
Okay.
That the party put Sawyer up to do the bidding of the white alderman. That's what Evans' spill was.
Okay.
But really what was behind the scene is that Daley cut a deal with Evans to split the black vote so Daley could win. And further down the line, Tim would become chief judge.
Okay. So got it. So Harold dies.
Correct.
And there's a battle between two aldermen to become mayor. At the time, Tim Evans, and it was at odds with Eugene Sawyer. Eugene Sawyer was seen as the white man's selection, and that rumor was pushed by Tim Evans.
Correct.
A deal was cut where Rich Daley went to Tim Evans and said, "Look, I will ensure that you become chief judge."
Daley at the time was the state's attorney.
Yes, I will ensure that you become chief judge of the county, and that will give an opportunity for me to run to become mayor. And that's how the deal was cut.
Correct.
So fast forward 20-something years.
No. Then after that, when Evans came back up to run as alderman, the payback was Preckwinkle running against Tim Evans. Evans lost.
Okay.
And so then they wanted to take care of Evans, and so Evans became chief judge.
Okay. So fast forward to 2016, Tony Preckwinkle is president of Cook County. Tim Evans is the chief judge. This is the peeling back of some old wounds.
Right. And so
political wounds. So Preckwinkle was going after Tim Evans.
Right.
Now to get him ousted.
Right.
And she was able to get the support of Ed Burke, alderman of finance chair, and some other key people to circle the wagon around Evans to get him out.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
And it did not work. Ultimately, Tim Evans was able to retain his seat as the chief judge.
Correct.
And the beat goes on.
Yeah. And so, I tried not to talk about Preckwinkle a lot because I came out the Stroger administration.
Okay.
So I don't want people to see.
Stroger was the previous.
Right. Okay. And I don't want people to think that when I talk, I'm showing a bias. But I have yet to see any gains. Well, I have yet to see the same gains Black people got under the Stroger administration, and when you compare it to the Preckwinkle administration.
Okay. So John Stroger, are you talking about John or Todd?
Both.
Okay.
Both.
So John Stroger was president of Cook County 20-something years, maybe longer than that.
Almost 20.
Okay. And then his successor
was his son Todd. His successor
was Bobby Steele. And then her successor was John Stroger's son, Todd.
Correct.
Okay.
And
so Tony Preckwinkle, who at the time was the 4th Ward alderman, decides to run for president of Cook County against Todd Stroger.
No, Mayor Daley calls Preckwinkle and tells Preckwinkle to run against Todd for county board president because Todd gave a big contract to a Black firm over a firm that Mayor Daley's brother, the county commissioner, wanted.
Okay.
And so they warned Todd that if Todd did that they would put all their resources behind somebody else to beat Todd.
So the white Democratic establishment went after Todd Stroger.
Correct.
For giving a contract to a Black firm instead of the firm that Mayor Daley's brother was affiliated with and wanted.
Right.
Okay.
So that's what happened. And the argument that the Black folks had is that this firm, which is a bond firm, had gotten the last 3 bond deals from Cook County, and how come a Black bond firm couldn't get one? And then to add even more insult to what happened with Todd Stroger is that a lot of people didn't know, but 38% of the county contracts went to Black firms under Todd. Today is back to 6%.
So there's a question as to how loyal Tony Preckwinkle is to the Black community since she's taken over the presidency of since she's been elected to the elected president of the Cook County Board.
Right. So she's basically doing what white folks has done to us for years, is that I want to be Black. I want to be around Black folks. I want to help Black folks when it's time for me to get my people or myself elected or reelected. But when it comes to helping the pocket of Black people, she's just as white as white.
Okay. So she wants Black votes, but once she gets in, she does little for Black people.
Right.
Got it. Well, It looks like Tim Evans was able to retain his seat despite the fact that the white Democratic establishment's wagons were circling around him, led by your President Preckwinkle.
Correct.
Got it. Got it. Got it. Is there anything more you want to add about that?
Oh, that's a 4-hour show.
Oh, well, okay. Well, we'll move on then. There's an article in DNA Info recently titled, "In the Criminal Justice System Rigged Against the Poor, Even Do-Gooders Stay Silent." Written last week, and the argument was basically that the local criminal justice system is rigged. That's not shocking. Where the article indicated that it actually starts with powerful politicians who control it. They say politicians stay in office for building a reputation for being tough on crime. And they back it up with crime stats that seem to show that Chicago is safer than it used to be. And this ultimately puts pressure on the Chicago's police superintendent as well as the Cook County prosecutors. And I guess they are pressured to show that they're making an arrest, to show that they're getting convictions and convincing judges to send the bad guys to jail. So this article is making the argument that the police, the prosecutors, and the judges are criminal justice system co-workers, and where they end up relying on each other to catch, convict, and punish criminals. And so I guess the article was saying there's a tradition to treat what police officers write on arrest reports and testify about in court as gospel. And so there's little incentive for these prosecutors to accuse police officers of falsifying a report or making false statements because, number one, these prosecutors are shooting for a 100% conviction record. Mm-hmm. They're saying it may hurt their chances of winning cases. They say it may damage their relationship with cops and investigators on the street who they rely on every day in court. And then the prosecutors, if they happen to win convictions based on a lie, are immune from being sued in civil court. And so he highlights that. He also highlights the fact that cops who end up being sued for misconduct are represented by the city of Chicago, even when they have acted improperly. And so when city lawyers end up signing off on various settlements, the fact of the matter is Chicago, being a self-insured municipality, has a financial obligation to spend the least amount of money possible defending these civil suits. So they end up settling when they think the case is unwinnable. And with this idea that the city believes that cutting deals is best for the city's bank account. And as a part of the settlement payout, the article indicates that there's this binding agreement that absolves the police officers or the city of any wrongdoing. And so all this plays a role in supporting the idea that the local criminal justice system is rigged, and poor and disproportionately Black and brown households end up getting the brunt of that rigged system. Now, people have been talking about this for years. And what we're talking about in the city of Chicago and Cook County is a reflection of what's happened in Los Angeles, what's happened in Cleveland, what's happened in Baltimore, and other places where there are large urban populations of poor people who are disproportionately Black and brown.
None of this is, well, for me, in my opinion, the do-gooders are just as bad as some of these other folks who say they want to help Black people and they really, really don't. Me personally, since I come from government, I believe that people in law enforcement or people who have jobs in government that historically has caused the government a lot of lawsuits because of self-pay, that they have their own personal liability insurance. You have to have one to drive a car. I believe also you need to have one when you own a gun.
These are cops.
Yeah, I believe that police officers should have, some type of liability insurance, because I think that they would think twice before they just walk up to a car and start shooting in it. I think they would think twice before they get up and go, beat up on somebody. Now, I'm sure if someone was a trial lawyer, they would love that, because, these cases go to court and, we could get to the point where it gets too expensive for the police officer to pay insurance. So it's something that has to be looked at to make it cost effective for the police officer, because the county and the city do the same thing. Instead of us going to court, let's say I just give you $2 million and everyone agrees to it and they walk off. When in some cases, for example, the $5 million, here's a prime example: the $5 million the city paid out for the McDonald case, wasn't it 5 million?
Yes.
Somewhere around there. If they had insurance, these police officers had liability insurance, the family would have gotten more, but the city would not have paid the $5 million. That'd been $5 million left, in the city's general revenue fund, whatever fund it comes out of. But there has to be something where, and then let's say if these cops or these police officers did have to have some form of insurance, would they have been so quick to shoot this man? Would they have been so quick to try to cover things up? But you don't have to think about the implications of your actions when somebody else is going to foot the bill if you mess up.
And I guess from a prosecutor's perspective, if the article indicated that if a prosecutor happens to win a conviction based on a lie, they themselves are actually immune from being sued in federal court. And so they definitely have, I guess, the prosecutors, the police have some bulletproof jackets in the form bulletproof policy jackets, if you will, that allow them to act egregiously and, obviously irresponsibly in many cases in poor Black and brown communities. And I assume that is probably what the author, there's no assumption about it. This is what the author was referring to when he's indicating that the criminal justice system is rigged. And again, it's not just in Chicago and Cook County, but across the country. When we talk about how poor communities, especially those that are disproportionately Black and brown, interface with government. Frank, we're going to pivot a little bit. Let's talk about Chicago State University.
Woo!
Chicago State University, I believe, is a HBCU located on the south side of Chicago.
Yeah.
Predominantly African-American student body, one of, I believe, 9 or 11 state universities in the state of Illinois. After just 9 months on the job. After just 9 months on the job, President Thomas Calhoun Jr. is apparently parting ways with Chicago State.
That dude was run out.
Does he run? Well, I don't know that to be true. I just know that he's no longer there. Chicago State has been facing some issues for a long time. They were struggling to stay afloat with a heavy reliance on state funding and were a victim of the almost 1 year impasse. They actually at one point claimed a state of financial emergency. Their accreditation status was at risk because of shaky finances. 40% of the faculty have either been terminated or laid off as a result of the budget impasse. A lot of the academic programs have been cut, and their graduation rate is a paltry 11%.
And their dorms don't have hot water.
Frank, now, Chicago State was constructed by the state legislature, spearheaded, I believe, by Emil Jones. SIU, Southern Illinois University, was built by the Southern legislators. They made an argument that our students, our population needs a university in the southern part of the state. Well, members of the Black Caucus, I believe led by Emil Jones, indicated that, well, you know what? Black folks need a university too. Why can't we get a university? And as you know, these universities are economic engines. They provide employment opportunities as well as educational opportunities for folk that come from households that may not have the wherewithal to pay for college. Now we're in a situation where Chicago State looks like it's approaching death. In closing, in your opinion, do you believe that Chicago State is seeing its last days?
No, no.
Are you optimistic and hopeful, or do you really believe, or is this based on something more tangible?
My concern with Chicago State is that the governor gives Chicago State to University of Chicago, and then Chicago State by name is no longer there, and it's called U of C Southside.
Well, wait a minute. University of Chicago or University of Illinois at
University of Chicago wants to buy Chicago State.
The private university wants to buy Chicago State. So what does that mean for a lot of the student body who may not come from the type of households that will allow them to compete?
They'll be kicked out. They'll go to Governor State or I don't know.
So you're saying that the death of Chicago State is near, because it sounds like they will no longer be Chicago State.
That's my concern if the governor gets his way. Mm-hmm. I believe Chicago State needs to change its board and get a board that can work with the professors. That's what Chicago State needs to do. The state needs to come in and really fix Chicago State's infrastructure to get Chicago State more in line with the other universities. And people from Chicago State need to look at how Governor State has propelled itself. Chicago State does nothing to get kids from downstate to come upstate to go to school. They don't do anything to get kids from Cleveland, Milwaukee, or some of the other surrounding cities that are within 6 hours of Chicago State's campus.
And it's my understanding that in many cases, Chicago State does not have the resources that other state schools have.
No, they don't. But would you get?
And so it's not a level playing field when you talk about Western, Eastern, or Southern Illinois.
No, it's not.
Chicago State has per capita a larger population of kids that come from low-income households, a larger population of students.
But that's not the problem.
Well, from what I understand, they played a role in terms of their funding mechanism. Other schools have endowments.
No, I used to represent Chicago State. Chicago State's problem is that the leadership at Chicago State hasn't been stable, and the General Assembly has been nervous in giving them the same amount of cash that an Eastern Illinois or a Western Illinois would get, because there hasn't been any consistency in what happens for Chicago State. Like, for example, Chicago State is the only state university that gets money from casinos. Mm-hmm. But how are they spending that money? How can you have an interim CFO for 2 years?
Gotcha. Do you believe that the state may have played a role in tanking Chicago State?
No.
Okay.
It's the board.
Okay. There you have it. I want to thank you for listening. This is Convos, Unheard and Disregarded on iHeart, IntellectualRadio.com. Thank you for listening. We'll talk next week.
Have a good one.